Welcome to qiphyedu. Today we'll be looking at economics paper 12, February-March 2023. Alright, let's start. Okay, so for the first question, it says a good is more suitable to be provided by the market if it is what? So the three goods that can be provided by market would be private goods, merit goods, and demerit goods. All three of these goods have the characteristics of being excludable and rival, but merit goods, private firms are unsure of making a profit out of merit goods because of information failure. And demerit goods, it's overconsumed, but it harms consumers. But private firms are sure of making a profit out of it. So all three of these goods, they have the characteristics of being excludable and rival. So the answer is B. Question 2, it says, what is the definition of long run? So long run basically is when you have all factors of production can then be adjusted, and instead of just having like one item being able to adjust during that particular time period, it's in the long run, many factors of production can be adjusted so that you can increase the quantity of goods sold or whatnot. So here we'll see which one is the closest one. So A, it says a time period when all factors of production are specialized, which is not correct. And then C, it says the time period when all key inputs into production are variable, which is not correct. And D, it says the time period when at least one factor of production is fixed, which is not correct. So answer is B, a time period when all factors of production are variable. That means that all factors of production can be adjusted, right? That's for the long run. And then for question 3, it says the table states the consequences of two macroeconomic policies and what correctly identifies whether the statements are normative or positive. So A, it says, for the left statement, it says a depreciation of an exchange rate will cause the balance of payments to improve. So for this particular statement, it can be tested. It is factual, so it is a positive statement. And then for the right, the statement on the right side, it says a rise in the minimum wage rate will cause unemployment to rise. It could be tested, so it's also a positive statement, so the answer is D. Anything that says the government should depreciate the exchange rate or what, that's all basically part of the normative statement. And if let's say it's something like the government should raise the minimum wage or something, that is also considered normative statement because that's based on opinions. Here it's testable to see whether or not it is really true. Alright. And then for question 4, it says the diagram shows the PPC for wheat and corn. Alright, so this curve basically states that the production of both these goods basically for their opportunity cost, it's constant. So what can be deduced from the diagram? A, it says as the price of corn falls, more of it is demanded, which is wrong. As you can see, it's constant opportunity cost. And then B, it says resources used in producing corn are more efficient than in producing wheat, which is wrong because both of them, the opportunity cost is constant. C said the opportunity cost of producing corn falls when moving from M to N, which is wrong. And D says the opportunity cost of producing corn is constant when moving from M to N, which is correct. So answer is D. Question 5, a supply curve is represented by the equation quantity supply equals 10 plus 5p, where p equals the price of the product, and which price rise would cause the quantity supplied to double. So here it says which price rise would cause this thing to double, so it will be x2, right? So here let's try one by one. So it says $1 to $2. So assuming that originally it's at $1, that means it's 10 plus 5. So it'll be 15. So if we move to $2, that will be 10 plus 10, so we get 20. So this is not correct. Let's try B. B is also 10 plus 5, so we get 15. And then for $3, we'll get something like 10 plus 15, so it's 25, which is also not correct. And then for C, it's also $15 for a start. And then for $4, that'll be 20. So 20 plus 10, we get 30, so this is correct. And let's look at D first to confirm. So 10 plus 5, so we get 15. $5, that'll be 5 times 5, which is equals to 25. 25 plus 10, we'll get 35, so this is not correct as well. So answer is C. Alright, so for question 6, which diagram illustrates unitary elasticity of supply? So PES equals to 1, regardless of, because for PES, if let's say PES equals to 1, the curve must start from 0. So A is not correct because PES is basically less than 1. B, PES is more than 1. And D, PES is basically unlimited. So the correct answer would be, I'm just going to draw it out so it makes more sense here. So PES more than 1. And that's why PES is basically infinite. And then C would be the correct answer because PES equals to 1. Question 7, in which case is the price system not a possible method of allocating resources? So in which case would the price system not be a method to allocate resources, which means that the item itself cannot be provided based on the price mechanism. So the item must be either a public good or it could be a merry good. So A, it says in the distribution of foodstuff among the population, which is wrong. Foodstuff is considered private good. B, in the hiring of workers by employers, nope. C, it says in the ownership of land for agricultural use, nope. So D, it says in the provision of public goods by the government, yes, public goods cannot be not a possible method of allocating resources. All three above can be used by can use the price system to allocate resources, but D, you can't because it's public goods. So it has to be allocated or decided by the government. Okay, so for question 8, a sports stadium has two prices of seats. The cheaper seats are $10 and the more expensive seats are $20. When the prices of all seats are increased by 10%, the effects on demand are 4 or 5% for the cheaper seats and a 4 or 12% for the more expensive seats. And what describes the responsiveness of demand to a change in price? So this one we need to use PED to calculate. So PED, that would be percentage change of QD over percentage change in price. So this one you can see that prices of all seats are increased by 10%, so it doesn't matter for the cheaper seats and the more expensive seats. So that the effect on demand will be 4 or 5%, so that will be negative 5%, and then divided by 10%. And then for the more expensive seats would be negative 5% divided by negative 12% divided by 10. So here you get negative 0.5 and here you get negative 1.2. So for the cheaper seats would be inelastic and for the more expensive seats would be elastic. So answer is C. Question 9. Which statement correctly describes the shape of the demand curve for a normal good? So which statement would then describe this shape? So here A, it says it shows an inverse relationship between income and quantity demanded, which is wrong. So for shape of the demand curve for normal good, it has to be price and quantity. So B, it says it shows an inverse relationship, which is between the price of the good and the quantity demanded, which is correct. C, it says a positive relationship, which is not correct. And D, it says it shows a positive relationship between income and quantity demanded, which is not correct. So the answer is B. Alright, and then for question 10, why does the basic economic problem of scarcity apply to both the rich and the poor? So the reason for that would be, let's take a look at the 4 options. A, it says the choices people make are not dependent on income inequalities, not correct. The basic economic problem would be that we have scarce resources and humans' wants and needs are actually more than what the scarce resources are able to handle. So B, it says consumers pay the same price for goods and services to satisfy their wants. Nope. C, it says human wants exceed what can be produced from available resources, which is correct. D, it says natural resources are unevenly distributed among stations, which does not apply. So answer is C. And then for question 11, butter and buttermilk are goods in joint supply. Supply curves in both markets slope upwards to the right. How concerns cause people to reduce their consumption of butter, and what are the initial consequences for supply in the markets for butter and buttermilk? So both are in joint supply. Supply curves in both markets slope upwards to the right, and then reduce their consumption of butter. So it will be something like this. So this is the supply curve and this is the demand curve. And then reduce your demand, so this will shift to D1. That means that you'll move left along the supply curve, so C and D is wrong. And then for supply of buttermilk, because of the fact that the supply of butter move left, that means that your supply of buttermilk, because it is in joint supply, it will shift to the left. There will be a decrease in supply for buttermilk, as there's already a movement to the left along the supply curve for the supply of butter because of less demand. So answer is B. You can think of it this way, like people are already trying to reduce their consumption of butter, so at the same time, the supply of buttermilk will also decrease because of the decreasing demand for the original material used for buttermilk. So that's why for supply of butter, it moves to the left, and then for supply of buttermilk, it shifts to the left. right? Question 12, the diagram shows the demand and supply of a good, and when the market is in equilibrium, which area measures the difference between what consumers are willing to and able to pay and what producers receive at that output? This would be your consumer surplus. So 12 would be A, which would be X. This is your consumer surplus, like so. Question 13, why do some local governments subsidize the provision of bicycles to encourage their use? So the government decides to intervene by subsidizing the provision of bicycles. This could be due to a few reasons. Let's look at it one by one and see which one is the correct answer. Normally, when the government subsidizes something, it's because the good itself is a very good, or because it provides benefits to the consumer, but less people use it. So let's see here. A, it says consumers are afraid of having car accidents, which is not correct. B, it says consumers are unable to afford bicycles. Not really. Actually, bicycles are cheaper than cars. C, it says consumers are not aware of the external benefits of using bicycles. Yes, that's correct. D, it says consumers ignore the external causes of using bicycles. If consumers ignore the external causes, they would use bicycles. But then here it says they are trying to subsidize the provision of bicycles to encourage the use. That means that if let's say consumers ignore, means that a lot of people are already using it. So this is not correct. So answer is C. Question 14, the table shows Gini coefficients for both income and wealth in two countries. And which statement is correct? So this is about income inequality. So A, it says Gini coefficients are not comparable between income and wealth because one is a flow concept and another is a stock concept, which is basically not correct. You can see that for income, the Gini coefficient is 0.6 and then wealth is 0.4. You need to know that for inequality, the higher the Gini coefficient, the higher the inequality. The lower the Gini coefficient, the lower the inequality. So here you can see that for income, country P has a higher Gini coefficient, which means that it is more, the inequality for income is higher than country Q because it's only at 0.5. For wealth, country P is at 0.4, which means that wealth inequality is lower than country Q, which is at 0.7. So B, it says income inequality is greater in country P than in country Q, which is correct. And C, it says wealth inequality is greater in country P than in country Q, which is wrong. And D, it says wealth inequality is greater than income inequalities in both countries, which is not correct because one, you can see for wealth inequality, 0.4 versus 0.6 and 0.7 versus 0.5. So it's not that it's greater than income inequality in both countries, only for a particular one country. So answer is B. Question 15, the government is faced with rising inflation. It wishes to reduce inflationary pressure while avoiding a fall in output. So which action is most likely to meet its needs? So reducing inflationary pressure while avoiding a fall in output. So here will be your AS curve and here will be AD curve. One way to reduce price levels is by shifting the AS curve to the right, which means that you need to have more infrastructure and all those. So let's say A, it says an increase in laws to promote competition, which is correct. Let's look at the other three options. B, it says an increase in taxation. If there's an increase in taxation, your AD curve would then shift to the left, so not correct. C, it says an increase in the budget surplus, which means that your expenditure is more than your revenue. Your revenue is more than your expenditure, budget surplus. That means your AD curve would then shift to the left, so it's also not correct. And D, it says an increase in exchange rate, which will also shift the AD curve to the left, which is not correct. So answer is A. Because you can see if there's an increase in laws to promote competition, then more companies would be more efficient at producing goods, and then this will increase the real output. So at the same time, when they increase real output, the inflationary pressure is also reduced because of the decrease in the price level. All right, question 16. The table shows selected information from a country's national account. So you can see GDP is 28 billion. Net property income from abroad is negative 3 billion. And capital consumption is 6 billion and national debt is 2 billion. So GDP is 28, so net property income from abroad. So this one, you can see that to calculate this, the net income would be 28 minus 3 and minus 6. This would be 25 minus 6 and then we get 19 billion. Because net property income from abroad is negative 3 billion, which means that we are actually spending more than we earn. So we need to minus that out. And then capital consumption, we spend on our capital, so we need to minus that. And we're not going to calculate national debt here because national debt is not included here in the GDP. We want the national income, so answer is 19 billion, so 16 is A. Question 17, the graph shows the changes in the exchange rate of the pound sterling against the US dollar and the euro between the years 2001 and 2003. What happened to the value of pound between the year 2001 and 2003? So pound, you can see that from 2001 to 2003, the value of the US dollar actually dropped. So instead of £1 to 1.42 or 13 something, in 2003 it's now £1 to 1.75 US dollars. Here in 2000, here for let's say pound per euro. So originally it's €1 to about 0.61 or 62 pounds, and then later on in 2003 you can see that it's at €1 to about 0.7 pounds. So there's an increase in the value of there's a decrease in the value of pound. We look at this graph, and then this one you see there's an increase in value if it's to the US dollar. So what happens to the value of the pound between the years 2001 and 2003? You can see that it says the pound appreciated against the US dollar and depreciated against the euro, which is correct. But let's take a look at three other options. B, it says the pound appreciated against the US dollar and the euro, which is not correct because for euros it actually depreciated. C, it says the pound depreciated against US dollar, wrong. It's definitely appreciated. And D, it says the pound depreciated against the US dollar, which is wrong again. So answer is A. Question 18. Which statement about the circular flow of income is correct? So let's look at the four options here. A, it says exports and imports do not affect the economic level of national income because they always cancel each other, which is not correct. Because your exports and imports, they are not the same. It's very difficult for the exports and imports, the volume to be the same. It rarely happens, and they will not cancel each other. So this is not correct. B, it says the greater the level of saving, the greater the level of injection in the form of investment must be, which is wrong. That's not how it works. And C, it says when consumers use past savings to increase their spending, there will be a rise in national income. That's correct. D, it says when the government increases withdrawal by increasing the rate of income tax, there must be an equivalent increase in injections to compensate, which is not correct. So answer is C. Question 19, the graph shows a country's average annual inflation rate over a 5-year period. Okay, so what can be concluded about the general price level during the 5 years? So you can see that in year 1, the annual inflation rate is constant. In year 2, it increases. Year 3, it increases. And then starting from year 3 to year 4, it decreases. And then until year 5, it's a negative value. The general price level was never constant, so D is wrong. It rose in only 2 years, which 1, 2, 3, which is not correct. And then B, it says it fell in only 2 years, which fell as in because there's a negative inflation rate, but the only year that has a negative inflation rate is in year 5. So B, it says it fell in only 2 years, which is not correct as well. So answer is A, it fell in only 1 year. Right, so you can look at this one. It's a negative inflation rate, so it fell. Question 20, in an economy, wages and prices are both rising. The wages are rising faster. And which features are likely to exist in this economy? So wage and prices are both rising, the wages are rising faster. So when wages are rising faster, so this is your AS curve and this is your AD curve. So that means that this would be when there's rising wages faster than prices, your AS curve will shift to the left because it's wages above rate of inflation. So COP increases, shift to the left, so there's cost push inflation, so AB is wrong. And then yes, there is a rise in real income because of the rise in wages, so answer is D. Okay, so for question 21, the diagram shows the aggregate demand and long-run aggregate supply curves for a country. X is the original equilibrium position. In 1 year, over 1 million foreign workers left the country, so the LRAS curve shifts to the left. And at the same time, the country's currency appreciated against the currencies of its major trading partners. So the country's currency appreciated, which means that there's a decrease in the general price level. So your AD curve will shift to the left, so answer is C. Because if let's say it's a shift to the right, which would be something like this, your general price level increases, meaning that your country's currency has depreciated. When your country's currency appreciated, the AD curve would then shift to the left because of less expenditure, right? So this would be the answer. That'll be C. Okay, so for question 22, what is most likely to cause a rise in the country's exchange rate? So a rise in the country's exchange rate could be due to a few reasons. So there we have fiscal policy and monetary policy. So when there's a rise in the country's exchange rate, we need to look at monetary policy. This would be when your this is when your interest rate increases, your money supply decreases. So let's look at which one will be the closest one. A, it says a fall in its direct taxes, which is wrong. B, it says a fall in its export orders, which is wrong. C, it says a rise in its interest rate. Yes, that's correct. D, it says a rise in its imports, which is not correct. So answer is C. Question 23. Which change affecting the foreign exchange market for the US dollar would be most likely to result in a shift to the right of the demand curve and a movement along the supply curve? So affecting the market for US dollar, a shift to the right to demand curve. So let's see which one will be the most possible options. A is the US government reduces subsidies on exports to the EU. Now your exports are relatively more expensive, so there's no way that the foreign exchange market for the US dollar would actually, the demand would then shift, because when you reduce subsidies, your products are more expensive to purchase. When your products are more expensive to purchase, most people will choose not to buy the products from your country because of the higher prices. So A is not correct. B, it says foreign currency speculators in Switzerland believe that the US dollar is undervalued and act accordingly. So for B, it says that the US dollar is undervalued. So when it's undervalued, your demand curve would then shift to the right. And then when it shifts to the right, it'll be something like this. So this is a port. So previously it should be SD. So it shifts to the right, so it'll be something like this. Right? So they believe that the US dollar is undervalued. So act accordingly. So this is what happens. So answer is B, but then let's look at the two other options. C, it says the US government intervenes in the foreign exchange market so as to bring a drop in the value of the US. If you drop the value of the US dollar, it's basically value of US dollar, the supply curve will either shift to the right or the demand curve will shift to the left. So nope. And then for D, it says US pharmaceutical companies experience a fall in demand for their products from the rest of the world. If it experiences a fall in demand, then your US dollar will also experience a fall in demand. So D is not correct. So answer is B. Question 24. What can be best understood from a knowledge of a country's terms of trade? So the country's terms of trade is when we divide the price index of exports over the price index of imports. So if it says balance of payments is not correct, B, it says the purchasing power of its exports would be correct. C, it says the standard of living within the country is not correct. This is based on inflation or general price level. D, the value of its real exchange rate, which is not how there's no connection between terms of trade and exchange rate. So I'll say it's B, the purchasing power of its exports. Because when we know the price index of our exports and the price index of our imports, then we know the purchasing power of the exports that we have. Question 25. A company produces goods for exports only, and which change could cause a rise in the price of its goods while the quantity sold is unchanged. So a rise in the price of the goods would be when your domestic workers' wages increase because of the shift in the supply curve to the left, which would be something like this, a shift to the left. And then the foreign consumers' wages would then have to be increased as well. So if let's say the domestic workers' wages is unchanged, it's not correct. And then B, it says a fall in the domestic workers' wages. Anything that says fall would not be correct. So I say D, both rise. Question 26. Under which current conditions will supply-side policy measures be most likely to achieve a country's key macroeconomic goals? So the country's key macroeconomic goals is low unemployment level and stable price level. So answer would be a complete opposite of what we actually wanted. So low unemployment levels and stable price levels. So C and D is wrong. So answer will either be A or B. So high unemployment levels and rising price levels. So answer is B. Because when there's high unemployment levels and rising price level, using supply-side policy measures, we can then help to increase employment and produce more products, at the same time decreasing the price level. So this means that this supply-side policy measures will work when we have high unemployment and rising price levels. Okay, for question 27, why might a government prefer to use floating exchange rates? So let's just look at the four options here. A, it says it allows the government more independence in policy making. B, it says it encourages the government to build its foreign exchange reserves. C, it says it eliminates the instability of free markets. And D, it gives firms more confidence in future costs and prices. So C and D is mostly it's basically when there's fixed exchange rates, so it's not really correct. And then A, it says it allows the government more independence in policy making, which is correct, because when you have a floating exchange rate, the central bank can then decide on whether they want to increase the exchange rate or decrease the exchange rate. So yes, it does allow the government more independence rather than having a fixed exchange rate. B is not exactly correct. In this case here, the best and the closest, the more accurate answer will be A. For question 28, what is least likely to rise as a result of the use of expansionary fiscal policy? So aggregate demand would increase, so this is not correct. Budget surplus will increase, which means your revenue is more than expenditure. This will not increase, so this is correct. C, it says nominal income. Your nominal income would increase, and then your inflation would increase as well because of the shape of the AD curve to the right, so it looks something like this. So when you shift to the right, your price level increases, and then your nominal income increases, and then your AD increases. So answer is B. Question 29. The table shows GDP indices for a country over a 3-year period. So year 1, it says real GDP is 100, money GDP is 100, and then in year 2 is 105, 107, and then year 3 is 106 and 115. Inflation and economic growth are two macroeconomic policy objectives, and which role gives a correct assessment of countries' achievement of these two objectives over the period? So you can see that the GDP increases, so the real inflation would then have to increase, right? So A, it says cannot tell, not correct. It says real inflation declining, which is not correct. Now we cannot determine whether this inflation is positive or is it rising, but we can tell that there is indeed inflation, so the better one will be positive. And then the rate of economic growth is the real economic growth is actually, if you look at real GDP, it's the same. And then for real GDP, you can see it's actually lower than money GDP. Same goes for year 3. You can see that money GDP is 105, but then your real GDP is 106. So there's a decline in economic growth because the real GDP is lower than your money GDP. So answer is C. Question 30. A government raises interest rates to improve the current account of the balance of payments, and what might reduce the effectiveness of this policy? So A, it says a fall in domestic growth, which is not correct because you raise interest rates to reduce your outflow of money. You want to increase your inflow of money, so now less money will go out. So a fall in domestic growth will not reduce the effectiveness. B, it says consumer pessimism, not really correct. C, it says increased domestic savings, which definitely will not decrease the effectiveness because when you raise interest rates, that's what happens with increased domestic savings. So D, if your price elastic demand for exports, then say for example, when you raise interest rates, now your exports will not become more expensive, and when it's elastic, that means that when there's a change in price, the quantity demanded would then change more than the percentage change in price. So that would definitely reduce the effectiveness because there'll be less inflow money because of the increase in interest rates. So answer is D. Okay, so this is the end of this paper. So for this particular paper, it's actually a bit different than papers from a few years ago. This one is based off the completely new syllabus, and you can tell from the few questions inside, there are some questions that have been slightly modified. Some questions have never been, that are rarely been on past papers before, including the one on the Gini coefficient relating to the inequality ones. So you can see that there are a few questions that have changed. There's no more characteristic of money, and you can see that some questions are actually a bit different from the previous papers as well. To help you better with the new syllabus, it's actually recommended that you actually complete the specimen papers and then try this paper for yourself without referring to this video, right? Because this paper is actually quite different from the previous past year papers, right? So I hope you find this video helpful. Do share it out to other people who may need this video, and I think the next video would be about another economics past year paper again because of the upcoming economics paper 1 exam, and I hope to see you again in the next video. Till then, this is qiphyedu.